I'm sure you already use scaffolding strategies to help each of your students learn. The reality is, a classroom of students, just like any workplace, is really a hodgepodge of readiness, abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. In order to help all of our students learn, we have to be able to scaffold instruction in more than one way and on the fly. Today, I have the skinny on 9 ways to scaffold instruction. I'm Lisa Burns, a teacher success coach, veteran elementary teacher, and mom of 5, and this is the Teach Joyfully podcast. Thanks for joining me today. Are you missing out? Team H.O.P.E Insiders get extra encouragement, tips and tricks, surprise freebies, and more. Become a H.O.P.E Insider today and get access to all kinds of freebies at www.hopeineducation.com/vault. Before we dive in, I just want to say congratulations to Amy Dunford. She won the Teachers Pay Teachers $100 gift card. Thanks to all of you that entered the drawing. And Amy, check your email. So what is scaffolding? According to Ed Glossary, scaffolding refers to a variety of instructional techniques used to move students progressively towards stronger understanding and ultimately greater independence in the learning process. I do believe all students need scaffolding at one time or another. In fact, you probably scaffold your teaching when you don't even know that you're doing it. You're going to see yourself in some of these strategies as we go through them. Trust me, I know you will. So what I'm going to do is give you all of the strategies, and then we'll talk about each one individually. So let's dive in. The strategies are structure, teaching strategies, repetition, preparation, monitoring, organization, tools, time, and assessments. All right, let's start with number 1, structure. How, when, where, and with whom students learn is the structure of learning. There are various ways to learn: direct instruction, small group instruction, with partners, learning stations. There's all kinds of ways for students to learn material, and that's your structure. And the reality is, you won't just use one way for students to learn the material. They're going to learn it in various ways and encounter it over and over again. Which brings me to number 2, which is repetition. We are going to repeat, repeat, repeat. We cannot teach anything as a one and done. There's no way students will actually remember that. We must reteach in various ways, and the students need to encounter the material over and over again. For students who are really struggling with material, they might need to encounter it more often than students who are grasping the material more quickly. But repetition is still a scaffolding strategy. You will have to decide how much repetition and when, where, and how. I find with repetition, it is good for the repetition to come in a different format than it originally came in. So if you started with direct instruction, you might go into a centers or learning stations opportunity for students to encounter the material in a new and different way. Or they may work in partners with the material and work on something specific that direction. Okay, next up is teaching strategies. Teaching strategies are basically all of your teaching. It's that gradual release of responsibility that we all do. See, I told you already scaffolded. We give direct instruction, we model, you can co-construct. That means your students work with you to go and construct it together and work through it. And then we might go into a guide and practice, which is the students taking on more responsibility and us helping as needed. And then we go to independent practice. In addition, we can retrain or reteach as necessary in small groups or individually along the way. All of those are ways that we scaffold instruction. So one way that I scaffold instruction during my teaching is reading aloud to students when we're talking about reading comprehension strategies. It levels the playing field. It takes reading out of the equation so that students can focus on learning the strategies and then later on going and applying that in their independent practice. So there's lots of ways that you can use various scaffolding strategies within this framework. And next up is preparation. We prepare our students to be able to learn. I know you do this. It's background knowledge. Activating all that background knowledge and giving students additional background knowledge by giving them more input, giving them more information about the topic that you're going to be covering, give them more experience with it. It can be a video, it can be a book, it can be all kinds of things that we help students understand that topic and have some background knowledge around it before we dive into it. It can also be vocabulary instruction, supporting them with the necessary vocabulary that they're going to need along the way. This could be content vocabulary or academic vocabulary. Making sure students have their supporting skills in place. For example, if you're going to ask students to build a structure, but they're going to need to do some measuring, they need to know how to measure first. They need to know all about rulers so that they'll be able to measure before they have to actually use those skills. So making sure your students have the supporting skills in place before you dive into the lesson that's going to need those skills, that's a way that we scaffold instruction. Another way that I do this is by teaching strategies. So asking questions, using evidence, making connections, finding related ideas. All of these are comprehension strategies that we teach within our literature, but they're also strategies that students can use across the curriculum, and it helps them be able to access the information and talk about it, think about it, and wrestle with it. If they don't have these skills in place, it makes it much harder. But these are not only essential for our literacy instruction, they're essential across the board. Okay, so now we have monitoring. Monitoring, I'm sure, brings to mind walking around your classroom, checking in on students, making sure that they know what they're doing and they don't have any questions. Absolutely, monitoring is that. But in addition to checking in on the students' progress and helping them stay on task and being available to them, it's also timekeeping for them. You have 5 minutes left. You have just enough time to finish this piece. You better get on it. There's lots of little ways that we help timekeep for students and help them manage their time better, because let's face it, time is actually a spatial skill and not all students have good spatial sense. And so time is something that they may understand how to tell time, but they may not actually have a good concept of time in their head. And some people do, some people don't. And some people will struggle with that their entire lives. So providing some timekeeping for students can help them to stay on track and to get things done, because 1 minute may feel like 5 minutes to one student, but 10 minutes may feel like 1 minute to another student. And so giving students that time reference is helpful in helping them manage their time and keeping themselves on track. We don't want to stress kids out with this, but we do want to help them get a concept of much longer do I have? Do I have time to finish this? All right, moving on. Organization. Organization is something that so many students struggle with, especially young students. It is really hard to learn how to be organized. It's also hard to learn how to break down a task into what do I do next. Kids can get overwhelmed with things that seem fairly simple and straightforward to us. So being able to recognize that and help students manage that is important. So organization is things like breaking things down into the next doable task. And that can be with a bigger project. It can be with one assignment. It can be with a worksheet. There are students who can look at a worksheet and get overwhelmed, whereas everyone else is whipping through it, and you have this child who is looking at you like, I don't even know where to begin. So you might say something like, why don't you do number 1, 2, and 3, and I'll be back to check in on you in just a minute. Somehow, for some students, that breaking it down like that and knowing you're going to come back really is helpful for them in being able to manage their time, but also to feel organized and to know what to do next. And once they kind of get on a roll, usually they're good and they can keep on going from there. But you may have to check in 1 or 2 times with students in order to get them to that point. And in all honesty, it may take more times in the beginning of the year where you can back off more as they get further into the year and they are able to manage that a little bit better. Organization also includes how to manage their papers, how to manage their workload, knowing that anything that they didn't get a chance to finish can go into the work in progress folder so that when they have extra time, any point during the next couple of days, they can work on that and finish it up. So having a place for students to put work that they're still working on is a great way to help them. and then teaching students the systems and habits in order for them to be able to do that and use that folder. That's the next piece of that. So it's not just one piece of it. There's lots of steps to it. We have to be ready to teach our students how to use those kinds of systems. The other thing is providing roadmaps for students, a path, steps, pacing guide. What you use will depend on the scope of whatever your students are working on. And that brings me to the next one, which is tools. Something that you can use with that roadmap or path or steps, the pacing guide, can actually be some sort of an anchor chart or a poster or even just steps written down on the board so that students have an idea of what to do next and they have a reference, some sort of visual aid for them to be able to follow that path. Tools obviously are anything you can provide that helps support students that they can use to help themselves accomplish the task. It can be graphic organizers, posters, checklists, anchor charts, can be sentence starters with your partner. I expect you to hear you asking these questions and answering with this answer frame. The pilgrims needed help surviving because the problem in the story is blank. I know this because. You can give students manipulatives. You can give them prompts. All of these are ways that you can provide for students and support them with tools. Visual aids are tools, whether you're bringing in realia, actual physical objects or pictures. That's another way that we can help support students in their learning. And provide for their needs. Whether your students are English language learners or if they simply learn better visually, anything you can do to help provide tools that help students retain the material is our goal. And within the framework of tools, sometimes I think of them as strategies too. So it can be thinking aloud, recording their thoughts with an audio recorder, questioning strategies, talking it out with a partner. Those are also within that tools section for me. The next one is time. Now, the most common way that we help students with time is to give them extra time. Is that not right? I'm sure you've done it. I've done it. We've all had opportunities to give students extra time. But sometimes I like to give students less time. You might have students who don't do well with too much time. They may need you to shrink that time down a little bit to give them a sense of urgency. There are tasks that I give students and I say, you need to do this fast. You have 2 minutes. And so shrinking the time down is another way that we can scaffold because we're not letting students get too bogged down in a task. We want them to do it. Think about it. What are your first thoughts about it? And don't get bogged down in trying to overthink a task. So time can be extra time, but it could also be less time. So think about fast and furious tasks, especially for your perfectionists. You also need to give time for reflection. Time for reflection is an essential piece. And if you're doing a larger project, sometimes we need to have checkpoints and points where we stop and students can do a quick reflection. It's an opportunity for students to course correct, but it's also an opportunity for them to figure out what questions they have. If we're just go, go, go all the time, there can be a point at which students don't even know how they're confused. They just know that they're confused. They don't even know the question to ask. Giving them time for reflection can help them to form those questions and get the help they need so that they can move on. Time can be giving students checkpoints. If you give students checkpoints, you are helping them manage their time. You are helping them check in and see, am I on task? Do I need to adjust? I need to speed up. Oh, I'm doing fine. Or, oh, I'm going to be done early. Those checkpoints are also places to make sure that they've accomplished the task they need to accomplish to that point in time and that they're on track. And one more way that we help with time can be using a timer. Now, I'm not always big on timers because it can create a stressful situation for some students, but there are times when a timer is very appropriate. And so you kind of have to adjust. And last but not least is formative assessments. This is a type of checkpoint. It's a great place for students to check in with themselves, for you to check in with students and to see, all right, are we understanding? Is everyone getting this? Do we need to reteach? And do any course corrections that you need to do, and for students to do any course corrections that they need to do. It's a wonderful tool, and it is actually a scaffold because what happens is you are supporting students by making sure that they're checking in with themselves. In addition, formative assessments help embed the learning deeper. It's another way for students to be able to go in and check that they actually know the material, but it's also a way to help solidify the material in the brain. We know this from on-brain research. It does work. And so having quick, short, formative assessments is a great way for students to make sure that that material gets embedded a little bit deeper. Now, there are lots of other ways to support students and to scaffold for students. These are just a few, but it's a great place to start and start thinking about different ways that you can start scaffolding for students. Maybe try something new this next year. And remember, the entire point of scaffolding is to help students be able to understand the material better, but also to gradually move them towards more independence in their learning as well. I have a cheat sheet for you with all 9 of these scaffolds on it. So if you would like that, you can grab that in the show notes. So that's it for this episode of the Teach Joyfully podcast, my teacher friends. My sincere thanks to you, my listeners, for tuning in, and for all those of you who've taken the time to post a review. Email me your thoughts or DM me on Instagram with your feedback and topic requests. You can find the show notes and all the resources mentioned in the episode on my website at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. And remember, a happy teacher is a good teacher. Until next time, teach joyfully and take care of you.